ever notice that there's this spirit that just yearns for truth, that inner voice that just won't go away? You're having coffee with Conrad.
Conrad rocks!
Welcome everyone to another edition of Coffee with Conrad. This is Conrad from ConradRocks.net, Rocks of Revelation being poured out to you. I'm the author of the supernatural Christian book, Open Your Eyes, My Supernatural Journey, which chronicles my supernatural experiences before and after the kingdom of heaven. Before and after meeting Jesus, there's a very big difference. I podcast about what it is to walk after the Spirit. I investigate those deep things of God that a lot of people don't like to talk about. Largely, the spiritual walk is largely ignored by the Christian community. You ever notice that? Anyway, I love Jesus. I love everything about him. And there was a point, though, where I was convincing myself to think that Jesus wasn't real. God wasn't real, But before that time, there was a voice that I remember as a child. That childlike faith type time. And there was this inner voice, this inner knowing, where things that comes from. When you say in your knower, right there, that pit of you, the core of you. So I was searching for a label for that voice as a child. It's not just necessarily a voice. Sometimes it's just a knowing. It doesn't come in words. You know what I'm talking about, right? When you know something. And my dad would lead me in prayers on the side of our bed, and we would pray for other people. We wouldn't pray for ourselves so much. And I remember praying for family members and things that were important to me as a child. And when Dad was gone to work, I would carry that prayer life into my day. And I spent a lot of time alone as a child. I didn't really fit in with others that much. And a lot of people following my podcast obviously fit into that category. It's typical of people that are in the prophetic that, hey, they didn't have many friends when they were kids. You're considered weird, People somewhat avoid us, people with a prophetic call in their life. They've got this, and you know what I'm talking about, they got this love-hate thing going on with you. Because the people that ridicule us openly, it's fun to make fun of you in front of other people. But when their lives hit rock bottom, guess who they call? Because there's this inner witness. This is so far, I'm 50 now, I'm trying to figure it out. They know deep down there's something. Something rings true. Something beneath the conscious mind. It's the mind of the spirit. It's even below the mind of the heart, that constant internal monologue that keeps going. Out of the heart, the mouth speaks. There's adulteries, fornication, murders. You got your mind, you got your heart, and you got your spirit. So the spirit is that part that you cannot numb out permanently with alcohol and drugs. You try it, You try to throw that carnal, dirty reasoning over it, too, with all sorts of rationale and reasoning. If this, then that. If Christians do this, then there is no God. But you've got that inner spiritual witness that knows. It's like, hey, you're kidding yourself, right? That's kind of what it's saying. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you know what I'm talking about. There's this inner witness you just keep trying to squelch out with your mind and your heart. You don't want it to be true. You have this internal conflict because that inner spiritual unction, the part that's calling you to be with the Father, is betraying your fleshly desires. And there's so much dissonance, it's crazy. So there are times, though, there's glimpses when there's an opening, when the heavens open and they bypass that carnal BS for a moment. And it goes through that inner voice, it goes all the way down to the spirit. Like when you see a child smile, you know that God is in that. When you see the sun break through the clouds, and you don't really think about it, it just touches you. All that logic just disappears for a moment, and it bypasses all that, and it goes, hey, there's a God. When the stars at night cry out, there's a creator. Just for a moment there, you stop kidding yourself, and you know that, yeah, that's right, there is. This isn't an accident. But then you come to this awareness, and you start kidding yourself again. You're like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to drown that out. I don't like following that voice. The experts, by the way, now the experts are saying that God doesn't exist. The experts are telling us that the Bible is a myth. It's a copy of a copy of a copy. And you know what? I'm beginning to trust the things that I can see, taste, touch, hear, and feel over this spiritual thing, because the spiritual thing, it must be wrong. But even during all that, the Spirit's going, you're kidding yourself. Kids run off to college. They leave the family. They go to college with the intent of being on fire for Jesus and winning souls to the Lord, only to call home a few months later saying they don't believe in God anymore. Trading what the Spirit longs for a relationship, trading that, a relationship with the Creator, for the temporary pleasures of sin, starting to lean to their own understanding. That's the devil's playground, the rationale. And a lot of people say, well, Christianity is not logical. Logos is the root word for word, and it's the root for logical. It is in hindsight. Now, the verse that I guess sticks out in my mind right now is Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. This verse has proven to me over and over and over to be true. Many of the people that come on ConradRocks.net and offer their testimonies on my podcast, they were brought to church by their parents or their grandparents. They had an encounter as a child. My grandparents actually raised me. My dad, he was a traveling salesman, and it just turned out that my grandparents raised me. They didn't attend church so much. It's a long story. But my grandfather had a relationship with the Lord. I caught him praying several times. But it was like he was a closet Christian. He had to struggle. And he had several miracles in his life. Several, actually. And if you follow my podcast, you know how he got baptized. You know that an extra vein or artery grew in his heart that shouldn't have, that bypassed a blockage. But he was trying to drown out the Spirit. There was that internal conflict that he carried with him for a very long time. And he would say, Conrad, I know the Lord. And sure enough, I would catch him praying. So my grandmother, she sought God diligently after D-Dad had passed away. She's really into Jesus, and she would often discuss the Bible with me towards the twilight of her life. Anyway, back to the testimonies. They all have something in common, most of them anyways. They were all taught about God at an early age. They all, they fell away. Here's the testimony part, right? Even though they knew the voice of God was calling them back to the fold. Then life, through various set of circumstances of trying to drown out that Spirit of God, life brings them to their knees, and then they give their lives to Jesus because it's the reasonable service. It's the reasonable thing to do. Giving your life to Jesus is known as becoming a living sacrifice. We no longer live to ourselves. We live and die to Jesus. Giving our lives to Jesus resolves that internal conflict. It resolves the dissonance that's been struggling within ourselves since we started struggling. There's no longer a fight. And this is that peace that surpasses understanding. There's no longer an internal struggle. And for those of you that are saved, you know what I'm talking about. There's no that. Yes, there are struggles, okay, but not that one. The big one is over. Hey, God's real. Jesus is Lord. I get it. Now you're going to have problems, but that internal conflict is resolved. Now, I remember as a child, God would answer my prayers, and I had that childlike faith that Jesus talks about. I didn't even dare think that God couldn't or wouldn't answer my prayers. I was a little kid. I didn't know any better. And he answered a lot of prayers. Puppies, horses, a puppy and a horse, I remember. And as I grew older, I began to observe the hypocrisy in the church. My intellect started fighting with my spirit. I took my eyes off of Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, and I began to look at the storm of hypocrisy in the pews. Then the storm became more of a focus for me than Jesus. I took my eyes off of Jesus, and I looked at the storm, and I began to sink. But as I was looking at the storm, I knew that Jesus was always there, like a backup. You know how police have backup when they're going into a terrible situation? They call for backup to help them. So when things get bad, they've got backup. So I used to kid myself. I would say to myself, because of this internal conflict, well, I'm going to party. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to do all this sin. And then on my deathbed, I will give myself to the Lord. Because somebody said somewhere that all you got to do is say the sinner's prayer on your deathbed and you'll go to heaven. So I'm like, cool. I'm going to do that then. I'm just going to party and have fun. And on my deathbed, I'll give my life to the Lord. That's the danger of the sinner's prayer. All you have to do is confess the Lord with your lips. And I'm not going to dive into that really, but one thing I will say is you will know them by their fruits. And even when I was trying to kid myself, saying, oh, I'll do this deathbed thing and I'm just going to party and have fun, the voice told me, hey, well, how do you know there's going to be time? Right? I mean, I'm like, oh, so there's that conflict. So as I got older, and I went into the world, and I kept finding people in my life to help shore up my ammunition against there being an actual God of the Bible. I kept looking at the hypocrites in the church to justify myself in my agnosticism at best. I decided to, didn't say atheism because, there's a God. I mean, there's something going on. I had all these supernatural experiences in my life. You can read my book. So I said, I'm going to give the Eastern religions a try, the ones that don't deny the supernatural aspect of our lives. And I'm blown away at how Christians can read their Bibles and deny the supernatural. Why pray for healing? Aren't you praying for something supernatural? Why pray for jobs or income? Aren't you praying for a supernatural intervention? Why pray for protection? Aren't you wanting supernatural angels, ministering spirits of fire to protect you? So all this while, I was trying to kid myself that this voice and that, the spirit that was prompting me was mislabeled. I'm like, okay, well, it's not the God of the Bible. It's mislabeled. It's something else. Man, I knew I was kidding myself. I just knew it. So there's a chapter in my book called the Starfire prayer, and I guess I'll go there. I was with I was backslidden. I was hanging out with Donnie, and we were in San Pedro Harbor, and the boat had died. He had a 21-foot Starfire. And this boat was his baby. It was his life. I don't know what else he owned. And this boat just mysteriously stopped. We're in San Pedro Harbor. And, I'm seeing the sunset. And then all of a sudden, this oil tanker is coming out of the sun. It's so big and it's so fast. And it blocks out the sun, as the sun was setting in the west. And anyway, to make a long story short, we couldn't start the boat. And this tanker was going to kill us. I'm not really sure. I mean, if it would have killed us, but they have the swirls of these huge props, and you don't know if you're going to. I don't know. I kept thinking of all these times where you hear of people dying at sea from getting run over from a tanker. So that was predominant. And anyway, so we were discussing with the Harbor Patrol or Coast Guard or about getting out of there. That we didn't have time to get towed out. I mean, it was going to hit us really quickly. So I'm putting on my life jacket because they told us to swim out of there. Leave the boat, swim, save your life type thing. So I'm putting on my life jacket, doing what I thought, it made sense. But he was preoccupied with his boat. He really loved his 21-foot Starfire. So I started thinking, if I swim to safety, I was trying to get him to leave. He wouldn't do it. If I swim to safety, I'm going to be known as the guy that let Donnie die with this boat, And so something came over me to pray, And they say there's no atheists in foxholes. This was a moment where I don't know how bad things would have been if I'd have stayed with him and we'd got hit by that boat. But this was a moment that was serious enough that I was in a foxhole. And the voice that I kept wrestling with for a long time, several years, was available. And I prayed. And I prayed. And I knew the boat would start for some reason. I said, Donnie, try it again. And he tried it one more time. And it started. And we left. God's real. And He will meet you. He will meet you in your foxhole. That's why we have testimonies. That's when God shows up. Anyway, I have experiences like that. When I was going to write my book, Open Your Eyes, My Supernatural Journey, I was going to write a 2-in-1 thing because Open Your Eyes is more about my supernatural experiences. I'm going to have to revisit and see what all I put in there. But there's lots of times where I was just supernaturally saved from being killed. I mean, just crazy stuff. And I knew, man, I'm going to tell you, I knew it was God. You're breathing right now. You're listening to this podcast. I'm going to tell you, God has a purpose and a destiny for your life. And you know it. I'm sitting here just confirming something that you already know. You know in your knower that Jesus is Lord. When I'm going to say that, I'm going to say I knew God was real. And then as we grow older in our maturity, we know that Jesus is the way to the Father. No man can get to the Father but by Jesus. Amen. So, thank you for listening to my rant today. God bless you. I want to thank you for being a part of my life. Thank you for being a part of Conrad Rocks. If this has moved you, please consider sharing this with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, Google+. Or maybe saying to people outside, hey, have you heard the Conrad Rocks podcast? It's about walking after the Spirit. Also, there's a support page at conradrocks.net. If you'd like to partner up with me, you can support via several different ways. God bless you. Till we meet again, dig deeper and go higher.
Dig deeper, go higher at ConradRocks.net.